The Iowa Hawkeyes are going dancing down in the state of Alabama. We'll talk briefly about that matchup with the Auburn Tigers, Bruce Pearl's Auburn Tigers, in just a little bit. Plus, an opportunity for you to win free Iowa Smokehouse meat. Talk about how coming up, and I'll also unveil my bracket, my completely filled out men's bracket, my completely filled out women's bracket. All that coming up during week 214 of Brada's Branded Thoughts, March Madness edition. This is from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Straight from the man cave Kinnick under the kitchen, authentic, original player art prints are being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. From under the kitchen's Murray Legacy print, which features former Hawkeye Kenyon Murray, current Hawkeye Chris Murray, and current Sacramento King Keegan Murray, to football players Lucas Van Ness, Torrey Taylor, and Cooper DeJean, to wrestlers Tony Cassiope, Alex Marinelli, and Real Woods. Oh, and only one of the greatest athletes to ever compete at Iowa, Spencer Lee. There are so many options available, and they make great gifts. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. It's underthekitchen.square.site. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. Well, as yet another Iowa basketball season begins to wind down, we hope it's not over quite yet, as the Hawkeyes do have a chance to make a run in the NCAA tournament. I do want to thank our sponsors once again, and Under the Kitchen sponsoring this show. All of our sponsors, you can find them in the description below. If you've been enjoying the content, maybe for this past season or even the last couple of seasons since the start of this platform from the Hawkeye of the Storm, be sure to support our sponsors. You can also donate to the channel, the cause here, as we continue our coverage, our post-game coverage, our podcasts, our live shows, all of that supported by means of your support of our sponsors and, of course, your donation. So appreciate all the people that have made this possible as we are approaching the end of yet another very, very interesting Iowa basketball season. And speaking of basketball season, March Madness is upon us. Selection Sunday having come and gone. A very interesting weekend. I know some people reacted to the selection from the committee and kind of feeling like the committee did the Big Ten a bit of a disservice with just 8 teams selected. Rutgers looked like a tournament team to me. They had more quad one wins than some of the teams that made it in ahead of them. But I think the Mawat Mag injury hurt them, and I do wonder implications moving forward for head coaches to maybe not be as upfront and transparent about injuries and the extent of injuries on their roster. Now, that's a discussion for a different day. I'm disappointed for Steve Peichel and company, as I talked about during the live show on Sunday. But the Big Ten's got some reputation to recover, right? I mean, this is a conference that has not performed well in this tournament for several years now. Haven't had a national champion since 2000. This is a year where the Big Ten needs to perform, and Iowa's one of those teams. Now, with the committee laying out the bracket as they didn't really do the Big Ten any favors. Purdue's got a pretty favorable draw. When you're a 1 seed, you can expect somewhat of a favorable draw. I do think Michigan State's a dangerous team. We'll talk about them here a little bit. Before we get to my men's bracket, I want to run through my selections for the women's basketball tournament and give you my completely filled out bracket. Now, if you're listening to this on audio later, try to follow along as best you can. Perhaps pull out your paper copy of your bracket as I run through. I'll try to do this somewhat quickly as we run through all the matchups in the first round, and then I'll give you my selections all the way through the national championship game. So let's look at my filled out NCAA women's basketball bracket. We start in the Greenville 1 region with South Carolina. We all know the storylines with Aaliyah Boston. They will dominate Norfolk State in that opening round game. They advance. South Florida Marquette in the 8-9 matchup. I like the Bulls to advance, and they'll have a difficult showdown with a very athletic Gamecock squad in that round of 32. The 5-12 game there, Oklahoma and Portland. I like the Sooners to take care of business. Number 4, UCLA, taking on number 13, Sacramento State. I expect the Bruins to hold serve there. They will face off against the Sooners in that round of 32. How about Creighton, a team that knocked off Iowa and Iowa State last year in the Big Dance? They are seated higher this year, and deservedly so. They will take on the winner of Illinois and Mississippi State. Illinois, a dangerous team. We saw them give Iowa problems during this past season, but I do think Creighton wins regardless of who it's against, whether Illinois or Mississippi State gets out of the first 4 game. I think the Blue Jays will take care of business. The Fighting Irish of Notre Dame will win. They'll take on Southern Utah. You've got a 7-10 matchup. I've got an upset here, actually. I've got number 10 West Virginia taking down the Wildcats of Arizona, and they will face off against the 2-seeded Maryland Terrapins, who will beat Holy Cross. We look at the Sweet 16 in the Greenville region, who will advance the final 4 of that section. I see South Carolina taking care of business against South Florida. Oklahoma will take down the UCLA Bruins. Notre Dame over Creighton in the round of 32. And Maryland, the Big Ten, getting a team in the Greenville 1 region to the Sweet 16. Maryland advances to face the Fighting Irish. And in that Sweet 16, I've got South Carolina advancing over Oklahoma. I've got Maryland advancing over Notre Dame. So I will not say it's going to be an uneventful region, but I do think you're going to have the top 2 seeds from that Greenville region advancing to the Elite 8. We head over to the Greenville 2 region. The Hoosiers, a 1 seed in the tournament. They will advance over either Tennessee Tech or Monmouth. Oklahoma State and Miami in the 8-9 matchup over in the Greenville 2 region. I'll take Miami to win in Bloomington, and they will advance to take on the Hoosiers. You can't have an NCAA tournament bracket without at least one 5-12 upset. I've got Florida Gulf Coast taking down Washington State. They will advance to take on number 4 Villanova. Villanova will face off against Cleveland State in the round of 64, but they advance to take on Florida Gulf Coast. How about an upset in a 6-11 game? The Michigan Wolverines taking on a very, very underrated, I think, UNLV team, 31-2 on the season. The Rebels will make it 2 double-seeded teams in this region advancing to the round of 32. They will take on number 3 LSU, a team that will take down Hawaii as the 14 seed in that first round. North Carolina State, 7 seed, will take down Princeton. I've got Utah over Gardner-Webb, so we've got a 7 versus 2 matchup towards the bottom of this region. We head back to the top. Indiana, Miami. I've got the Hoosiers advancing over the Hurricanes, and I've got Villanova beating Florida Gulf Coast, ending a potential Cinderella run for a Florida Gulf Coast institution that not that long ago we saw the men's team make a run in the Big Dance, but I think the Wildcats will take care of business in advance to face Indiana. LSU, they have been really good this year, 28-2 on the season, yet still a 3 seed. I think they're going to be maybe feeling a bit disrespected in this tournament, and they advance over the Rebels. They will face yet another lower seeded team, North Carolina State, who I think will upset the 2-seeded Utes of Utah. I think that sets up an LSU North Carolina State Sweet 16 matchup. We start, though, with Indiana and Villanova. I've got the Hoosiers beating Villanova and advancing to face LSU. LSU will have taken down, at this point, they will have taken down the 14 seed, the 11 seed, and the 7 seed. They'll have their hands full in the Elite 8 against Indiana. We head down to the Seattle 3 region. That's lower right of your bracket. Virginia Tech will take down number 16 Chattanooga. USC, the 8 seed, will take down the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State. The 5th-seeded Cyclones will beat the Toledo Rockets in a 5-12 matchup. Number 4 Tennessee will take down St. Louis. North Carolina, the 6th seed, will beat the winner of Purdue and St. John's. Ohio State will beat James Madison. Baylor will take down the Alabama Crimson Tide, and UConn will take down the Catamounts of Vermont. We head back to the top of this region. Virginia Tech set to play USC. I like the Hokies to advance. I like the Iowa State Cyclones, Ashley Jones and company, taking down the Lady Vols, setting up a very intriguing Cyclones-Hokies matchup in the Sweet 16. I believe North Carolina will upset the 3-seeded Buckeyes of Ohio State. Ohio State with a terrific Big Ten basketball tournament, but we know from the men last year, the Iowa men, that's not always an indication. Big Ten tournament success, conference tournament success is not always an indication of a deep run on the horizon once you hit the NCAAs. I think North Carolina wins that game and advances. And UConn, the 2 seed, will take down the 7-seeded Baylor Bears. It will set up a pretty blue blood-esque matchup between North Carolina and UConn. We head to the top, though, of the region. Iowa State taking on the 1-seed Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech may be a bit overrated. I do think the leadership of Ashley Jones gets it done against Virginia Tech, and Iowa State advances to the Elite 8, and they will face the UConn Huskies. The 2-seeded Huskies will take down the Tar Heels of North Carolina, setting up a 5-2 matchup for a spot in the Final Four. We head to our final region, the Seattle 4 region. The 1-seeded Stanford Cardinal will take down the winner of Southern and Sacred Heart. Ole Miss will take down Gonzaga in the 8-9 matchup. Number 5, Louisville will take down the 12-seeded Drake Bulldogs, and Texas should advance over the 13-seeded East Carolina Pirates. 6-seeded Colorado should take down Middle Tennessee State in a 6-11 battle, and number 3, Duke should take care of business against the Gales of Iona. Number 7, Florida State, I expect them to take down the 10-seeded Georgia Bulldogs in Iowa City. And speaking of Iowa City, the Iowa Hawkeyes should run through Southeast Louisiana to advance to the round of 32. We head back to the top of the region. Stanford Cardinal should advance over the 8-seeded Ole Miss Rebels. It will take on the 5th-seeded Cardinals of Louisville. I do think Louisville will take down number 4, Texas, and number 3, Duke will take care of business against Colorado. The Hawkeyes should take care of business against the Seminoles, setting up a rematch from a game last year. Iowa-Duke in the Sweet 16, 2 versus 3. But we head first to the Cardinal of Stanford. They'll take on the Cardinals of Louisville. I expect the 1-seeded Cardinal to advance. Stanford will take on the Hawkeyes, who will get revenge on a Duke team that beat them last year in the regular season. What a matchup that should be, 1 versus 2 in the Elite 8 between Stanford and Iowa. And we look now at our Elite 8 matchup, starting in the Greenville 1 region. Maryland and South Carolina. Can anybody take down the Gamecocks? Maryland has the athleticism. They rebound well. I am predicting an upset, folks. I've got Maryland over South Carolina. They will play Stanford. I think that the Cardinal will take down the Hawkeyes. Eventually, I do think Iowa's defensive struggles will be their downfall, but not until after a really nice run of the Elite 8. Obviously, a Final Four trip would be fantastic, but I think Stanford wins, and they'll take on Maryland. The other Elite 8 matchups, Indiana and LSU. I've got another upset here. The Big Ten with 3 teams. I'm projecting 3 teams from the Big Ten heading to the Elite 8, but just one going to the Final Four as LSU takes down Indiana. And how about an Iowa State-UConn battle? I've got the UConn Huskies beating Iowa State. It will be Maryland, Stanford, and LSU-UConn in the Final Four down in Dallas. I've got Stanford beating Maryland, and I've got UConn beating LSU, setting up a very entertaining 1-2 matchup in the national championship game. And I've got a 1-point win for the UConn Huskies. 72-71. The UConn Huskies will be national champions over the Stanford Cardinal. Those are my women's basketball picks for the 2023 NCAA tournament. So I know I ran through that kind of fast. I'm trying to get through 2 brackets here in just one show. Certainly, if you disagree, tell me in the comments. Tell me why. Perhaps I'm discounting your team. That's fine. And I'm not saying the Hawkeyes can't make it to the Final Four. I do think Stanford is a better matchup for Iowa than certainly a South Carolina or a UConn. Iowa played UConn earlier this year, nearly beat the Huskies. But I do think Stanford may be a bit too athletic for Iowa. That should be a real good Elite 8 game. Can you imagine the Hawkeye turnout if that ends up transpiring in Seattle? All right, that brings us to my 2023 NCAA men's basketball tournament bracket. Without further ado, let's look at my picks. First of all, Alabama, the overall number 1 seed. I have been very adamant about the fact that I do think Alabama is very beatable. They don't always play the best of defense. They haven't traditionally under Nate Oates. I do think they win their opening round game and advance to face Maryland. This is a toss-up. I think it's going to be a great 8-9 matchup. Maryland has struggled to win away from home. They'll take on Joe Toussaint, Bob Huggins, and that Mountaineers squad. They've been up and down, playing better here late in the season, got them into the tournament comfortably. I think the Terrapins find a way to win in Birmingham. It's going to be tough to beat the Crimson Tide in that second round matchup. How about San Diego State? Talk about a red-hot team that nobody's talking about. I think Charleston's kind of been the trendy pick, the trendy 12/5 pick in this tournament. I like the Aztecs to advance. Obviously, that's a program that's had tournament success. They've been there, done that. Brian Dutcher gets it done, and the Aztecs advance to face a very, very good defensive team in Virginia, but a team that struggles to score. I think they beat Furman. Furman's not used to being in this tournament. Congratulations to the Paladins, but I think that Virginia does advance to take on the Aztecs of San Diego State. How about a red-hot Creighton Blue Jays team, a team that lost to Nebraska early? They were looking like going from being a top 10 team preseason to being potentially not even in the tournament. They've come on really strong in that Big East Conference. They take care of a North Carolina State team that I really didn't think deserved a bid. Basically, all the Wolfpack did this year was avoid bad losses. They don't have very many good wins on the resume, really any really good wins on the resume. I think Creighton takes care of business. How about an upset here? UC Santa Barbara. I've got the 14 over the 3 here. Baylor with a couple late losses this year to Iowa State. Iowa State's a hard team to predict as well. But I think UC Santa Barbara, you look at their resume, they have a lot of good things in a subpar conference. I get that. I think UC Santa Barbara advances, and they will take on the Creighton Blue Jays in the second round. How about Mizzou and Utah State? Missouri, another team that's kind of hard to get a read on. I think a lot of SEC teams, at least in my opinion, a lot of SEC teams fall under that umbrella. I've got the Aggies of Utah State. They were coming on last year. They're better this year. I've got the Aggies advancing, and they'll take on the Arizona Wildcats in the second round, who will take down Princeton from the Ivy League. We head to the round of 32. Can the Terrapins beat Alabama? I think that home court advantage in Birmingham is going to pay huge dividends for the Crimson Tide. I don't think Alabama's unbeatable by any means. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. I think Alabama wins this game simply because of home court advantage. And remember, I mean, Maryland, even if they beat West Virginia, those road struggles are well documented. And this is basically going to be a true road game for Maryland. How about San Diego State, Virginia? I talked about Virginia's struggles to score, and that's been kind of a year after year thing under Tony Bennett, but they have had tournament success with this style of play. It's been more successful than a Fran McCaffrey style of play, certainly. I've got the Aztecs winning. I got an upset here, and San Diego State kind of a surprise team on to the Sweet 16. I've got Creighton over UC Santa Barbara. No Cinderella run here for Santa Barbara. I think they advance to take on Arizona. And by the way, I went back and forth between Utah State and Arizona. Would not be shocked to see Utah State beat Arizona, which would make a really fascinating Creighton-Utah State matchup in the Sweet 16. But I do have Arizona's talent, their athleticism winning out. They'll take on the Blue Jays. Alabama, San Diego State. Here's my upset, folks. I've got San Diego State, Brian Dutcher and company, taking down the Crimson Tide. We know the off-court issues, the Brandon Miller situation. It has been a weird year for Alabama, but they got the overall #1 seed. I think San Diego State surprises them. And again, this game will not be played in Birmingham. It will be played down at the KFC Yum Center in Louisville. And although I think Alabama fans will travel, well, I see San Diego State going basically on the road here and winning. Creighton taking on Arizona. I've got the Blue Jays upsetting the Wildcats. I talked about this on Sunday. Creighton has been a trendy pick for me ever since really middle of February. I think they advance, and this is kind of an interesting Elite Eight matchup between the 5 seed and the 6 seed, San Diego State and Creighton. I don't think a couple of teams that I don't think many people would have predicted to be in the Elite Eight, so maybe going out on a limb a little bit, but I've got San Diego State and Creighton in the Elite Eight. Let's look at the Midwest region. Houston and Northern Kentucky. The Norsemen trying to lead an upset here. Would be one of the biggest upsets in NCAA history. I don't see it happening. Nothing really popped off the screen at me when I was doing research on Northern Kentucky. I think the Cougars advance, and I think the Hawkeyes advance over Bruce Pearl and Auburn. I think it's going to be a really good game. Iowa has struggled to shoot the 3 away from home at times. Auburn's really good against the 3. But man, as unpredictable as this tournament is, I would not be surprised to see Iowa go down to Birmingham and shoot really well. I think they advance. And boy, what a game that will be, Houston and Iowa. If it happens, Houston and Iowa on Saturday. I've got the Drake Bulldogs, a 12 seed, upsetting Miami, the 5. I don't think it's a bad draw for Drake. I know some people said that. I think Miami's beatable. They made a run in the tournament last year, made a run to the Elite Eight. But I like Drake to advance, and they'll take on the Indiana Hoosiers, who should take care of business against a pesky MAC winner in Kent State. I've got the winner of Mississippi State and Pitt taking down Iowa State. Look, the 6-seeded Cyclones have been good at times. They've been terrible at times. Really hard to count on them. You could say the same thing about Iowa at times. I've got the winner of that Mississippi State Pitt game winning and advancing to take on Jack Nungy and Xavier, who will take care of business against Kennesaw State. Penn State riding high after nearly winning a Big Ten tournament championship. Big comeback against Purdue, falling just short on Sunday. I've got the Nittany Lions beating the Aggies. Not necessarily predicting a Cinderella run. We'll talk about that, but Penn State playing really good basketball. Micah Shrewsbury, the hottest name, one of the hottest names right now in the coaching carousel. We'll see if he stays there in State College. I hope he does for the sake of the conference. But I've got Penn State beating Texas A&M, and I've got Texas beating Colgate. Colgate, a team that's been a kind of a perennial tournament team in recent years, but I've got the Longhorns taking care of business. I've got Houston over Iowa. Look, can Iowa beat Houston? Maybe, but Houston's another team that defends the 3 really well. They've got a lot of experience in this tournament. They're down one of their best players in their loss against Memphis the other day. I think Houston beats Iowa, but this is an opportunity for Iowa to get off that schneid of 24 straight years or whatever it is, having not made the NCAA Sweet 16. Indiana Drake, I've got the Hoosiers beating the Bulldogs. Would not be shocked to see Drake win, but I think Indiana advances to take on Houston. I like Jack Nunge and Xavier to beat the winner of Mississippi State Pitt, who will beat Iowa State. I like the Musketeers to advance. They'll take on Texas, who will beat Penn State, the 10-seed Penn State Nittany Lions. And I think Houston beats Indiana. Texas beats Xavier with a 1-2 matchup in the Elite Eight, the winner heading to Houston. Let's look at the West region. Kansas taking down Howard, 116 there. I've got Arkansas over Illinois. Illinois has been up and down all year. Arkansas didn't finish the season off on a great note, but I do like Arkansas to win a good 8-9. I think they've got several really good 8-9 matchups for the record, including Memphis FAU, which we'll get to in a second. I think Arkansas advances to take on Kansas, which, by the way, is a rematch of the two teams' bowl games this past football season. St. Mary's and VCU, I've got the Gales advancing. I've got Iona, Rick Pitino's crew, advancing over UConn. Will Rick Pitino stick with Iona? Probably not. I think they upset UConn, and they'll face St. Mary's. TCU will beat the winner of either Arizona State or Steve Alford's Nevada Wolfpack. Got the Horned Frogs advancing. And by the way, they can make a deep run. If Mike Miles is healthy, Eddie Lampkin has already entered the transfer portal, so he's not going to be playing, but they're still really, really good. I don't think it's a great draw for TCU, but I do think they advance past the first round. Should have made the Sweet 16 last year, but it hadn't been for the Zebras in that Arizona game. Gonzaga will take on a team Iowa played a couple of years back, Grand Canyon. I think the Gonzaga Bulldogs, for the first year in quite a while, are kind of flying under the radar. I like Gonzaga to win. They dominated St. Mary's in the WCC championship here a few days ago. Northwestern and Boise State, really intriguing 7-10 matchup. Boise State, a good defensive team. Guard play wins championships. Guard play wins in March. I like Northwestern to advance, and I like UCLA to beat UNC Asheville. They'll take on the Wildcats in the second round. Kansas and Arkansas, I like the Jayhawks to win. Pretty favorable draw, I think, for Kansas to make a deep run as well. I like St. Mary's to beat Iona, and I like Gonzaga to beat TCU. Should be a really physical game, but without Eddie Lampkin inside, I don't think TCU maybe has the horses to get it done. They've been fragile. When Miles has been down, they've lost to teams they shouldn't have lost to. Northwestern State, a perfect example. I just think Gonzaga is better than people think. They're better than that number next to their name. I think Gonzaga advances. They've been here. They've done that. And obviously, they've had a lot of success in this tournament in recent years. UCLA, I've got the Bruins over the Wildcats and Northwestern. But, boy, this is an opportunity. This could be a game, folks, where the Big Ten could really put a dot on the map, so to speak. I think the Bruins win, but watch out for the Wildcats, and I will be rooting for Chris Collins' crew if that game occurs. All right. Kansas and St. Mary's in the Sweet 16. The Gales were good in the WCC tournament, nearly blew a lead to BYU, a huge lead to BYU, and then got killed by Gonzaga. St. Mary's has been good all year. It's hard to win every game by double figures. They did that most of the year. I like Kansas to win this game. You never know. I mean, I would not be shocked if St. Mary's makes a real deep run. They're typically pretty good in the tournament. Beat Indiana last year in the NCAA tournament, beat them handily. But I like the Jayhawks to advance. And Gonzaga will beat UCLA. It'll be a Kansas-Gonzaga, kind of a classic matchup here in the Elite Eight. We look at my East region. Purdue, they will take down either Texas Southern or Farley Dickinson. Texas Southern, one of the worst teams to ever enter the tournament if you just look at record alone. But they did win their conference tournament, and they'll have to get in by means of the first four here earlier in the week. But I like Purdue to advance, and I like Memphis to beat FAU. The Tigers coming off a conference tournament championship as well with a nice win over Houston, but somewhat undermanned Houston. One of their best players was out. I like Memphis to win over a Owls team that a lot of people are picking as the trendy Cinderella story in this part of the bracket. The fifth-seeded Duke Blue Devils have been coming on as of late. I think they advance over an Oral Roberts team that has had some recent success in this tournament as well. And I think number 4, Tennessee, will take down the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana. The Volunteers advance. John Calipari and the Kentucky Wildcats should take down the Friars of Providence. I do wonder about the Ed Cooley coaching conversation, how much that will affect the players. I mean, I would think it would become a distraction. You could make the argument for Iona and his guys as well, Rick Pitino's guys, but this is not the first year we've heard stuff about Iona and Rick Pitino. This is really the first year we've really heard a lot of scuttlebutt about Ed Cooley potentially moving on. I think Tennessee wins. I think maybe that conversation about their head coach becomes somewhat of a distraction and somewhat of a detriment to the team. I've got Keontae Johnson and Kansas State beating Montana State in the first round, and I've got Michigan State, the 7th seed, taking down the 10-seeded USC Trojans. They will advance to play the Marquette Golden Eagles, who will take down the Catamounts of Vermont. We head back to the top of this section. I've got Purdue over Memphis. I've got Duke over Tennessee. Kansas State taking down Kentucky. They have been a hard team to predict and really rely on this year. Talking about the Wildcats of Kentucky. I think the Wildcats of Kansas State advance, and I think Michigan State with a 7-2 upset over Marquette, a team that hasn't been this highly seeded maybe ever. I didn't ever look that up, but I'm guessing they haven't been a 2 seed maybe once or twice in the history of that program. Tom Izzo obviously has had a lot of success in this tournament in this month of March. I think Michigan State advances to the Sweet 16. Purdue and Duke, that should be a battle for the ages. These two teams played back in November with Purdue winning by a landslide. I think Purdue wins again. I think they're just a better team. I think Purdue wins in a close one, and they advance to the Elite Eight, where they'll face a Big Ten foe. I think Michigan State takes down Kansas State. A good draw for Michigan State. They are kind of my dark horse Big Ten team. And maybe not even a dark horse with that draw with teams like Kansas State and Marquette, who don't have a ton of recent tournament success. And I do think that comes into play in March. I like Purdue and Michigan State to advance to the Elite Eight. Let's look at my Elite Eight matchups, folks. San Diego State, Creighton. That's certainly maybe the biggest surprise here, surprising matchup in this round. I like Creighton to advance. Again, they've been playing really good basketball. Both these teams have been red hot in their respective conferences. I like Creighton to advance to Houston to the Final Four, and I like Purdue to beat Michigan State. The Zach Edey effect. We saw a heck of a game between these two teams a couple months back. I think Purdue wins. They'll take on the Creighton Blue Jays. Houston and Texas went back and forth on this one. Texas playing really good basketball, winning the Big 12 tournament. But I do think Kelvin Sampson and what he's done in Houston has been really good. They'll go back home for the Final Four, where they'll take on Gonzaga, who will upset Kansas, the 1-seed Kansas Jayhawks. Again, I think Gonzaga's underseeded, underrated here, and I think they advance to the Final Four. So you got Creighton, Purdue, you got Houston, Gonzaga. I like Purdue to beat Creighton. I like Gonzaga to beat Houston. Purdue, Gonzaga in the national championship game, and I've got the Big Ten winning its first national title since 2000. 74-70, the Boilermakers over the Gonzaga Bulldogs in the national championship. So those are my picks, folks. You probably don't agree with them, and that's fine. That's the epitome of this time of year. It's the epitome of March Madness and filling out brackets. And speaking of filling out your bracket, how about this? An opportunity to win free Iowa Smokehouse. Don't miss your opportunity, folks. Here's how to enter this contest. Join our From the Hawkeye of the Storm ESPN Bracket Challenge group. The actual name of the group is capital F, capital T, Hawkeye of the Storm. All right, this is the group. The group motto is relax. You can thank Coach Gary Close for trademarking that. So enter your bracket, just one bracket allowed per user through your ESPN account. All right, here's how it's going to work. There will be 3 winners based on final results at the end of the NCAA tournament. Third place will get a $50 e-gift card from Iowa Smokehouse. Second place, a $75 e-gift card from Iowa Smokehouse. And first place, a $100 gift card for Iowa Smokehouse. All you need to do is fill out your bracket and add that entry to our ESPN group. Enter it into our ESPN Men's Tournament Challenge group. And again, the winner will get a $100 gift card, second place $75 gift card, and third place $50 gift card. And then at the end of the NCAA tournament, we'll announce the winners through our social media platforms. And your job is to reach out to me with a screenshot of your account so we know that you're actually who you say you are. And of course, we'll get your contact information and send you your e-gift card courtesy of Iowa Smokehouse. So again, join our ESPN Bracket Challenge group. I'm throwing a link in the description of this video. All right, click the link to join our Bracket Challenge and have a chance to win high quality meat and snacks through our friends down at Iowa Smokehouse. Also, a reminder, we'll have an Iowa-Auburn first round preview on Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Central Time. It'll be a live preview with myself, Coach Gary Close, and special guest, former Hawkeye, Nicholas Bear. Join us live Wednesday, 7 p.m. for our Iowa-Auburn preview right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll talk to you then.